everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for our No Stupid Questions podcast. I'm Dr. Kim Bissell, the Southern Progress Endowed Professor in Magazine Journalism and the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Communication and Information Sciences, or CNIS, at the University of Alabama.
And I'm Dr. Annalisa Bowen, an Assistant Professor in the Department of Communication Studies, also at the University of Alabama. And we both work in the Institute for Communication and Information Research, or the ICIR, at UA. And so I have to let everyone know I recently adopted 2 puppies, and I'm not using that as an excuse for not sending emails or not getting things graded, but it does help. And why that news is relevant to today's podcast? Well, because our guest today studies communication about pets on social media, among other things. And I might have misplaced a modifier there. But one of the things that she studies is the way we communicate on social media about our pets. And well, to let you know, my sweet little Cooper and Francis have left my house turned upside down. I have not gotten any sleep. It's a mess. But I would never post that on social media. Right. So one could only conclude by looking at these pictures that I post on social media is that these 2 are the cutest, most snuggliest, and well-behaved and potty trained, that's a lie, 13-week-old puppies that exist.
During this pandemic especially, I feel like we've seen this uptick in the number of posts with pets and babies, and even requests from users asking for more photos of pets and babies. And we have dogs of Instagram and cats of Instagram, and my dog Luna is a rock star on social media. Yes, what do we learn from these types of posts, or is it merely for entertainment? What do these posts say about our culture and society, and what we're clinging to for connection, other than our sweet doggos, Luna, Cooper, and Francis?
So Dr. Jess Maddox is an assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Creative Media, and she studies the intersection of visual media and social media as a lens to better understand what is being communicated on social media. Why do we take and post selfies? And why do we find it so fascinating to do TikToks? How many of us have actually posted a TikTok since the start of the pandemic? We'll learn more about this in today's conversation. So we want to give a warm welcome to Dr. Jess Maddox.
All right, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So I just have to ask, and this can be observationally or based on what you've seen, do you think that we as a public are using social media more, or are we using it less in the face of this global pandemic? And is social media doing us good, or is it not doing us good?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely think we're using it more, just because it's such a way to stay connected and talk to people while we have to stay apart. It's in a way kind of like Zoom, but just the casual day-to-day things where we can just, talk to people, post Facebook updates, share memes, things like that. So I definitely think we've seen more of it during COVID-19.
Jess, can you give us an elevator pitch on your research?
Yeah, of course. So I study visual social media, and by that I just mean I use images and videos as my way in to understand social media and pop culture. So I study things like selfies and memes, YouTube, TikTok, and what these new and rapidly changing things can teach us about the internet and culture in general.
That's so interesting.
Well, have any of us done a TikTok since the pandemic started?
Oh, I've never created my own TikTok. I lurk on there a lot and watch a lot of stuff. But I did joke to my husband that when the pandemic started, I said, we'll have reached peak cabin fever when I start making TikToks for the dogs. So, not happened yet, but it might.
So, Jess, if you had to come up with a headline for one of your more interesting findings, what would that headline be?
Ooh. That's a good question. I would probably have to go with the title of a talk I gave at ICA last year in DC, and that was called "George Bush Did Not Kill Harambe. The Internet is Just Weird." A textual analysis I did of Harambe memes and newspaper articles around Harambe. In case you've living under a rock and never heard of Harambe, he was the gorilla that was shot and killed at the Cincinnati Zoo in 2016 after a child fell into his pen enclosure. Spawned so many memes, just so many iterations about this gorilla, because people love weird and absurd things on the internet. But what I was interested in was how these Harambe memes and the discourse around Harambe was happening at this moment. That was the height of the election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, the height of Black Lives Matter protests. And this was also relevant at the time because the child who fell into Harambe's pen enclosure was African-American. So Harambe, the gorilla, was shot and killed to save a African-American child's life. And many, in memeing this gorilla, argued Harambe didn't have to die. So there became this interesting give and take in the discourse around this event and the memes around this event of that for some reason people thought a gorilla was worth more than a Black child's life. So this is one of the ways my research into things like memes interrogates these larger issues of ideology, feminism, racial injustice, and things like that.
So when you study the content, is it the initial created content, or are you also looking at like comments?
That's a great question. And this is something a lot of internet researchers really grapple with and struggle with and try to figure out where to put in to their research, because as I'm sure y'all know, the thing about comments is there's so many of them.
Yes.
So unless, and I mean, that's the great thing about, larger computational tools that can scrape all that data. But even still, it's kind of, it could go on forever. There's so many and so many. So what I like to do in a lot of my research is focus on the texts themselves, the text in this case being the individual memes that are shared, and then often supplement it with press discourse and newspaper articles and magazine articles and blogs that are written about these internet images.
So how did you get started doing this type of research?
So it's really funny you asked that question today of all days, because I have been thinking a lot about my research roots, which were in selfies. When I was a grad student, I had worked in, I was an editorial, well, before I was a grad student, I was an editorial assistant at Pregnancy and Newborn magazine in Atlanta. And this was around the time everybody was using social media, starting to use social media for business. And as an editorial assistant, I realized the visual was always more interesting and engaging than simply text-based. And this was something I always kind of had in my mind. I went to grad school, never intending to get anything other above a master's degree, fell in love with theory, and this idea about visual social media was still really kicking around in my head. And I started really looking at it in terms of selfies. And the reason I say it's funny to bring it up today is because I'm watching this, the hashtag challenge accepted thing happen on Instagram, where women are posting or like tagging their friends and posting these black and white selfies to empower women and lift each other up right now. And I'm noticing, and it's so funny because I'm noticing a lot of backlash to this trend, and it's the exact same backlash I was writing about in 2013 and 2014 when I was using a feminist lens to pick apart selfie criticism and understand kind of the gendered accusations of narcissism that happen around selfies. And I'm seeing it again play out right now in response to this challenge accepted movement on Instagram.
That's really interesting. I want to go back to one thing that you said, that that in grad school you fell in love with theory.
Right?
So can you explain that? How does that happen? Because I mean, I feel like that's something that we have to like drag people into those courses, kicking and screaming, and
drag them through
drag them in, but they stay in kicking and screaming about theory.
Right. Yeah, I'm a nerd, which should probably not be a surprise to anybody. But yeah, I think that the reason I fell in love with theory is, I think the thing about going to grad school for me is all of a sudden I realized I always had this kind of like critical way of looking at the world, and I thought that just at the time made me weird. And then I realized theory gave me the tools to kind of actually do something with that. And I mean, I'm still weird, but now I have the tools to actually like engage with how I've kind of always thought about the world. So I really enjoyed that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you've talked about studying memes and different artifacts of social media. Are you just studying the content? Are you looking at the effects of the content? Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about the methods that you use to do what you do?
Yeah, of course. So my research is largely qualitative. So I, without getting too much into things like epistemology, I challenge the idea of one singular truth and all of that. But I like looking at how meaning is always made, always has to be actively made, and is always contextual. So a lot of my earlier research was very textual, using textual analysis and discourse analysis to look at content. But as my career has progressed, I've realized that doesn't necessarily answer all the questions I have. So I do a lot more interviews and participant observation work now.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, interview. So what I love about doing interviews with people about their internet habits is you really gain some amazing insights into how and why people use the internet in the ways that they do, just for everyday purposes. Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating. I learned so much from my participants, and they just constantly open my eyes to these things. And we try never to go, especially in qualitative research, to never kind of go in with any preconceived notions and even hypotheses. But we're human. Those things kind of creep in. I kind of sometimes have like, okay, maybe I'll find this, or maybe I'll hear about this. And the things people tell me just shatter all of that. And that's what I love, mm-hmm. that it's about qualitative methods, is you're always finding out these new things.
Mm-hmm.
Who are your typical participants?
So that's a great question. It definitely varies for kind of the project I'm working on. So the big project I'm working on right now, and I just got some great news on it this morning, is I am trying to write my first academic book on pet.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's on pet and animal social media. And this morning I just got word that a university press wants to send it out for external reviewing.
Woo-hoo! So, oh my goodness, exciting.
Thank you. I'm very excited about that. And so in this case, I have interviewed, am currently interviewing, and will be interviewing several different types of people. So I've interviewed people that make Instagram accounts for their pets. I am currently beginning to recruit people who do not have any pets of their own, but love following animals on social media and like following other people's pets.
Oh, that's me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm also reaching out to people who make YouTube and TikTok videos for their pets, and is reaching out to the folks who run social media for like zoos, aquariums, humane societies, things like that, to kind of get this big picture of basically how we engage with pets and animals on social media. So that's one of my current big projects at the moment, and who I'd be interviewing.
So I have to ask this: when you say pets, are you
Yes.
limiting to your garden variety dog and cat, or does this include?
Not at all. I have talked to people who have Instagram accounts for their bearded dragons.
Wow.
People with Instagram accounts for horses. I have talked to them for rabbits, which I guess rabbits are a little bit more run of the mill. And I'm currently trying to schedule an interview with somebody. They're not in the United States, but they have otters. They have pet otters.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's really cool because it's when I talk to these people, you also don't realize how many. My interview I did with this woman who ran an Instagram account for her bearded dragon. She's like, there's hundreds of accounts of for breeders and rescue organizations and people doing just like what she does and kind of having fun. But then the stuff that we typically think about Instagram of like influencers and merchandise and sponsored posts still creeps into bearded dragon Instagram. Like she was telling me she's been contacted by Etsy shops so her bearded dragon could model their bearded dragon clothes.
What?
For like be like 25% off with this. So those are the things I was talking about. Like I learned so much and I'm so fascinated by these things we see creep into even bearded dragon Instagrams. So
Well, you know, it's been interesting what I've noticed, I think especially since we've been in this pandemic and working from home, people will put, now this is on old timey Facebook, but I'll see, you know, requests, you know, please put your photos of your dog or cats, you know, I need a uplifting thing. And I've just seen that so much more in the last few months. I just want to see happy photos of dogs and pets. And
absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up because that's really one of the central themes of my book that I'm shopping out right now is that we use pictures of pets and animals to make the internet really light and habitable and fun for ourselves when we know that the internet is often not those things with doxing, partisan politics, filter bubbles, misinformation, disinformation, harassment, and all of those things. So I argue this is pet and animal images can be a way we carve out these spaces for ourselves to have fun on the internet.
So how, when you start, when you identify either a meme or you identify a question that you want to answer, how do you keep yourself from like chasing rabbits, to throw in a pet right there? Because it seems like, you know, you have mentioned that you always get kind of unexpected information, or some of the information that you get might lead to more questions. How do you rein it in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's such a, such a big part of qualitative research, and two, especially qualitative research on the internet, where, you know, eventually you do reach an interview some type of saturation. So even when, you know, the woman with the bearded dragon is talking to me about being contacted about these types of sponsorships, I wind up hearing that several times from other people as well, you know, but maybe they don't have a bearded dragon, maybe it's their dog or their cat or something, or their bird even, or something like that. So part of that is kind of recognizing like, okay, I'm starting to see these recurring themes, and yes, it's with different animals, but I also don't need to go out and recruit 25 people with bearded dragons. You know? But then the thing about doing qualitative research on the internet, especially working with like texts and even doing digital ethnography and digital participant observation, is really defining your boundaries and knowing, okay, this is exactly what I'm looking at. So in general, with research, we always have to define our boundaries and say, this is what I'm looking at and this is what I'm not looking at. But when the internet is our space for that, we really have to define those boundaries. And it's not a free for all. When I want to do some digital ethnographic work, I don't just get to run around to, you know, every social media platform and haphazardly look at these comments or that video or this meme. I have to be very specific and deliberate about, okay, here's where I'm going. I'm going to look at this YouTube community, and I'm going to supplement with Twitter and this community's subreddit. And that's where I'm staying. And that's where I'm going to triangulate and crystallize this information from, in that case.
Nice.
So Jess, from the way that you've described it, it sounds like much of what you do is solo. Do you have the opportunity to work with collaborators? And if so, who are the types of people that you find yourself collaborating with most?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. A lot of what I do is solo, but I do reach out to people. I do have a couple of collaborative projects going on. I just had an article accepted with a colleague at Temple University, a journalism professor named Brian Creech. We looked at what's called LeftTube, which is the leftist, politically left segment of YouTube that specifically responds to alt-right content. And so he's much more of a political scholar than I am, but I study platforms and internet and social media. So we were able to merge our interests and tackle this from a merged perspective. I'm also currently working with Dr. Shaheen Kantawala on a project about WhatsApp use in India.
Huh. Yeah.
It's merged. We're doing interviews with people in India who use WhatsApp. And one of the great things about interviews is you typically get 4 or 5 papers out of them because they yield so much rich information. Like in-depth interviews take a while, but you get that payoff of the rich information in several possible publications. So for even though Dr. Kantawala does more media effects and health research, and I do more of the popular culture, everyday stuff, we're tackling all of those subjects in these interviews by just talking to people about their general use, how much fake news is such a part of even these closed messaging apps. So that's great for Shaheen. And then with my area, we're talking about just kind of day-to-day use and how this manifests and things like that. So I do find myself with some opportunities to collaborate every now and then.
How does your research, or does your research contribute to social justice?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one of those things I definitely hope my research can do more of, contributing to social justice. But I do like to, one of the big things I like to interrogate in my research is dimensions of power and how our internet practices and the popular culture of the internet can uphold or challenge these dimensions of power along lines of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, things like that. So often, well, in the early days of the internet was hailed as this utopian space that could, we could leave our bodies behind and it would be the perfect, happy place for social interaction. And well, we know that's not true. So what is interesting today is interrogating and also pushing back on this idea that the internet is this toxic place, because when we really think, we don't want to divorce the internet from the people that use it. So the problem isn't racism, sexism on the internet. The problem's racism and sexism and other power imbalances and inequalities in general, and how they exist in everyday culture, and then how that in turn manifests on the internet.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. I like that a lot. So shifting gears just a little bit, can you tell us how the pandemic has potentially affected your research? And if it has, can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you've maybe faced or some of the bright spots?
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely, like everybody, I've definitely faced some challenges. I was supposed to do a lot of field work this summer. I was supposed to go to VidCon, which is the annual YouTube convention in Anaheim, California. I was also supposed to go to PetCon, the annual pet influencer convention.
Oh my gosh. I want to go.
And, I'm hoping maybe I can go next year to those things, but with gatherings of thousands and thousands of people, we'll see. So that has thrown a wrench into some of my fieldwork plans. So I've tried to supplement with more textual work and more interviews and things like that. And on a more day-to-day basis, I do miss going into my office or working in a coffee shop. And it's so funny because my husband works from home, and he's worked from home forever. So his life didn't really change much during the pandemic, except now I'm here all the time. now he has to hear me going, like, if he walks into the room to ask me a question, me like throwing my hand up and being like, shh, I'm writing, let me get this thought down. So that's but the dogs love that I'm home. I think they're gonna have some separation anxiety when this is all over, but
you are not the first person who has said that.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. My puppy is, if I work at the table, he sleeps under the table. If I work in the home office, he's laying right next to me. And he's a bad editorial assistant, though, because he just keeps sleeping on the job.
So Jess, let's we'll wrap it up. But I wanted to kind of ask you a final question, and that is, as academics, we have the good fortune of being able to travel in different cities around the U.S. for conferences and to present research. So what is one of the favorite places you have visited when you've traveled to present your research? And then where is somewhere that you're looking forward to going?
Yes. I was really spoiled. My first academic conference was the International Communication Association in 2015, which was in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And I just think we should have all conferences on the beach. Nobody would go to any sessions, but I think it would boost morale a whole lot.
Yeah.
So that one was always really special, just because, one, it was my first conference, and two, it was Puerto Rico, and it was beautiful, and it was amazing, and I just loved it. Where would I like to go? That's a great question. I am excited for ICA that's going to be in Paris, because I've never been to Paris, so that's really exciting. I'm hoping it also cycles back to Australia so we can actually go.
I know.
There's no global pandemic. But even in the U.S., I'm always excited to go to places like New York and Denver, Chicago. I love Chicago, so anytime a conference is there, it's always a good time.
Yeah.
Well, Jess, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and thank you for
having me.
Sharing a little bit more about your research. It's been really fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was great.
Thanks, Jess.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today in our conversation with Dr. Jess Maddox and all of her work related to social media. It was certainly a fun one today. Next week, we are really shifting gears, and we're talking about books. Not books that we've read, but books and how they are made, actually made. You're not going to want to miss this conversation. If you don't mind, please leave us a rating. We certainly appreciate you tuning in every single week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.